Hey, this is Waylon from Swiftwood Bows, and we're going to continue our journey with our hickory bow. So I just want to catch you up to where I'm at. We laid out the bow on the stave, and we roughed out the stave to get down to our lines. And then we worked on establishing an initial thickness taper, working the bow down so that we can start to get it bending a little bit at floor tiller. So let me show you what I've got here. I've got it really nice and cleaned up down to my lines. So that's the front profile. And then you can see how thin the limbs have become relative to what they looked like before. I did quite a bit of wood removal. I even switched back to my draw knife a little bit to start getting some of that wood off, because I was not close to bending this when I started removing wood from the belly. And then I just kept going with those, that faceting technique, taking it off the sides, taking it down the middle, rechecking to make sure that it's transitioning nicely from thick to thin. And so we've got it to the point, hopefully you can see this pretty well, where it's starting to flex. Not a lot, but it's moving a little bit. About the same amount in each limb. I can feel and tell that these are relatively close to being the same thickness. You see, I haven't done much with the handle yet. It's, just kind of in its bit rough shape. But this will be just fine for a while now. So I'm going to do a couple things here in preparation for getting the bow ready to bend some more. Once the bow starts bending, I don't like having this sharp corner here along the back of the bow. On the belly, it doesn't matter so much yet. We'll round those edges off later, but if we keep rounding these edges off and taking more wood off, we're just going to be spending time rounding these belly edges unnecessarily for now. But we don't want this sharp corner here on the back, because it's a place that just invites a splinter to pop up when we're starting to bend the bow. Probably at this stage it's not going to hurt anything to have it like this, but there's also no real good reason not to round them off at this point. So I just like to get that out of the way. Plus, it kind of helps me feel like it's starting to look more like a bow and less like a stave. And that always gives me a little bit of motivation, because things can kind of get a little bit slow at this stage. You feel like you're not making a lot of progress because there's still a lot of wood on there. You want to be careful with that feeling. You don't want to get too aggressive right now trying to get the bow to bend faster, because you can inadvertently create a weak spot in your bow that will could determine how strong your draw weight is. It might end up being a really lightweight bow if you're not careful. So stick with the plan, keep the wood removal really even as we're getting the bow to bend more. Make sure you're using the most efficient tool for the job. You don't want to switch to something that's really fine at this point, like a scraper, but you also don't want to be hogging away at this with a draw knife at this point, because you can do some irreparable damage. So just make sure you're using the best tool for the job, so you're being efficient, but you're also being careful. So I'm going to show you what I do to reduce the edge on here. So this is a fairly straightforward process. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to give you the idea. So some people say like a good radius for your corner is the radius of a pea. I don't worry too much about that. I just take a relatively not too aggressive file, and I just knock that corner right off. And then I like to clean it up with a scraper. And at this point, probably you can also clean up your side edges with the scraper as well. to get them looking and feeling smooth. We won't be doing a lot more work on the edges for now. I'll kind of show you here. So this is the sharp edge still, and you can see the smooth edge here. So just go ahead and do that all along the length of your bow at this point. Alright, I've got the corners all rounded off, and I'm just going to do one other quick kind of cosmetic thing. I want to get the cambium, this inner bark, off the back, and it's kind of up to you how much you want to leave on. If you leave it on too thick, it will kind of pop and peel off when you're bending it. But if it's just a little bit kind of down in the grooves of the back, you can leave it there if you like the way it looks. I'm going to take it off. So I've got a kettle of boiling water here, and I've got a spoon, and I've got this scouring pad. It's not too difficult. I don't want to waste too much of your time with it, but you just pour some boiling water on the back of the bow, and then quick while it's still kind of hot and wet, you just work on taking off the softened cambium. And probably going to have to do a few goes at each spot to get it off. And you may need to use a combination of the scouring pad and the spoon. You just decide how anal you want to be about it. But that's the gist of it. The main thing is that we're not damaging the back of the bow with a scraper or a knife or anything like that. We're not using anything sharp, so that outer growth ring of wood can be preserved without being damaged. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to the whole bow, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. I've got the bark cleaned all off the back. See what it looks like now. You can see that the grain on the back is not violated at all. I haven't cut through that layer of wood. I've just gently scrubbed and scraped off that layer of cambium. Just a quick note about that process. You are putting water all over your bow, which isn't ideal. I haven't found it to really affect the moisture content of the bow that much because it's all kind of superficial. So once I'm finished with that process, I will try to get the bow as dry as I can, towel it off. I've even used my heat gun, just almost like a blow dryer, to dry off the outer areas of the wood. I'm not heating it a lot. I'm not trying to, if you see any discoloration on the wood or anything, you're taking it too far. I mean, it's almost just kind of like a blow dryer to just get that surface moisture off. And then keep it somewhere dry for the next, you should be keeping it somewhere dry anyway. But just be mindful of the fact that you just poured water all over your bare wood. But it's a really effective way of getting that inner bark off the back. And like I said, I haven't really noticed it affecting the actual moisture content of the bow, as long as you're careful not to just leave it sitting damp. So I've got the corners rounded off. I've got the back of the bow cleaned up. So now we're really ready to dig into tillering the bow. We've got the bow bending a little bit here at floor tiller. Not much. I can't really tell much from it. Pretty much all I can tell right now is that the bow is bending, and I can get a sense of whether the limbs are bending about the same amount. And right now on mine they seem to be. So this is a good opportunity to use your fingers and really make sure that that thickness taper feels good. It goes from thicker here at the fades out to slightly thinner at the tips. It should be a really subtle change. If you have a significant transition from thick to thin, you're going to see the outer limbs bending way too much and out here. and nothing happening in here, and that's a warning sign that you need to balance it out more. It's going to be a subtle transition. So you're going to be wanting to pay attention to that, but if you're just beginning bow building, you don't really necessarily have a good sense of what it should feel like. So if you're just starting off, you're kind of developing this sense. So you're going to have to combine what you're feeling here with your hands with what you're seeing and feeling as you're pushing the bow on the ground. And if you see something with your eyes that doesn't seem right, you know, check and see, like, is it way too thick in here? Is it way too thin out here? Is there a thin spot here in the middle where it's doing all the bending? Those are the things that you need to be paying attention to. And you're probably going to get sick of me talking about this thickness taper and using your fingers, but we're going to go back to it over and over again, because I've found that it's just the most reliable tool for establishing a good tiller from the very beginning, before your eyes can tell anything, because the bow's not bending a whole lot. Your fingers can tell you a lot. And at times when my eyes seem to be telling me something about how the bow is bending, and then my fingers tell me something different, most of the time I find that my fingers were telling me the truth and my eyes were tricking me. So don't discount what your fingers are telling you. If you really feel a thick spot and it doesn't seem to be showing up yet in how the bow is bending, trust your fingers and work that thick spot down a little bit. And I think you'll find that eventually what your eyes are seeing are going to catch up with what your hands are seeing. Okay, well, that's enough talking. So our goal now is to simultaneously, we want to be maintaining and improving the healthy thickness taper, and we want to be slowly taking weight off of our bow so that it's bending more and more, and we're getting closer to the point that we can string it. So that's our next goal in the tillering process, is getting the bow to the point that we can put a string on it. We're not there yet. I don't have nearly enough bend, so I need to be working wood off of the belly, and this process is going to be really similar to what we were doing to get the bow bending it off its floor tiller. So you can continue to work with a rasp. Probably I will do that at this point because it's the most efficient tool. At a certain point, we're going to have to switch from a more aggressive tool like the rasp down to a card scraper. Now this is this is just a regular card scraper in a scraper holder. I use the scraper holder because I make a lot of bows. I spend a lot of time working with scrapers, and they can be kind of hard on your hands. And so this just makes it more ergonomic for me. It's definitely not necessary. I used a scraper by itself for many years. But I have to say the scraper holder is pretty nice in terms of keeping my hands from getting fatigued or starting to hurt after a while. So I can't tell you exactly when to switch over from the rasp to the scraper. At a certain point, the rasp is going to start taking wood off too aggressively so that you're not going to be able to stay in control of your tiller as well. And you're going to want to switch to the scraper. So for now, my bow's not bending very much. I'm going to stick with my little Shinto rasp here. And so, because I feel like my taper is good and the limbs seem about equally strong, I'm going to do some even wood removal. And we have to be kind of measured about it. I want to take the same amount off of this limb as I do on that limb. And there's various ways to do that. Some people will like take a marker or a pencil or something and kind of color all over the belly and then just remove all of the marks. and then do the same thing on the other side. I find that to be a little tedious, but it definitely works. You can count your strokes. I think that works better for a scraper. I find it a little bit less easy to do with a rasp. What I tend to do is I just, I'm still kind of using that faceting technique, but I'm being careful. My limbs are getting thinner, and I don't want to inadvertently take too much off the side and have to weaken the limb more than I mean to. So it's going to be really subtle at this point. But I'm going to keep using that technique. So I'm just going to kind of work down the limb at kind of a measured pace, paying attention to how many, how much I take off on this side. I'm going to try to take off the same amount on this edge, and then I'm going to take it off down the middle, and then I'm going to switch over to the other limb and I'm going to do the same thing. And then after every session of wood removal, so if I do this limb and then this limb, I'm going to take the bow off the shave horse, and I'm going to check everything again. I'm going to check the thickness taper. I'm going to check to make sure that the edges are staying even with each other. I'm going to do some floor tillering to make sure the bend is looking good. You can't check your bow enough, especially when you're first learning how to make bows, because it's so easy to get into a groove taking wood off and make a huge mistake that you're not going to be able to come back from by just taking too much off or inadvertently creating a thin spot, something like that. So just stop and check as often as you can. Alright, there's one side. I'm going to flip it around and take off the same amount of wood on the other side, and then we'll check it. I'm going to feel my taper and make sure it's still maintaining the thickness that I want. I'm going to check to make sure that this edge feels the same as this edge. So I feel like this edge is getting a little bit thin compared to this edge. So I'm going to make some little X's here along this edge so that I'll know to favor this side for a little while until I can get that evened out. This is really the best time to correct little stuff like that. If I just keep going and this edge stays thicker than this edge, and we get closer to getting the bow at a full draw, there's not going to be much that I can do about it at that point. I'll just kind of have to live with it and whatever consequences that gives me. But now I still have a lot of meat on this bow. I can start working this edge down and getting it to match the other one and still have plenty of weight to work with on the bow. So don't ignore little things like that you notice. It can be tempting to do that. I'm going to back the camera up a little bit so you can see, hopefully, how it's looking. Still not bending a whole lot. You're going to notice that your progress is going to feel slow at this point. You're not going to see necessarily a whole lot of change happening with each session of wood removal, and that's okay. Take your time and creep in to getting the bow braced. It's not a race. The more experience you have, the more efficient you'll be able to be with your time. But don't make efficiency your biggest priority at this point. You want to be as efficient as you can without sacrificing the quality of your tiller. So I'm probably going to need to do quite a few more sessions of rasping and checking and rasping and checking. So I'm going to keep working on that until I get the bow close to the point where I feel like it's bending enough that I can string it. And it's hard to communicate exactly what that looks like and feels like. There's a lot of variation in the bow making world about when to string a bow. Some people do it quite early. Some people wait to do it a lot later. I tend to fall more on the early side. I think stringing a bow, as long as the tiller's looking good and I can safely string the bow, I like to do it as soon as I can, because that's really my first opportunity to get a good vision of how the bow is bending and what's going on with my bow. Up until then, you know, the floor tillering, or some people like to do long string tillering, which I don't do anymore. It gives you an idea, but it doesn't give you a really clear picture. So I like to get to the bow strung sooner rather than later. So I'm going to keep working on this. You keep working on your bow until you kind of get it in line with where I end up before I'm going to before I'm going to string the bow, and I'll check back in with you before I've got it ready to string. All right, we're moving right along here. I've been rasping these limbs down, taking even amounts off of each limb, checking it with my fingers to make sure the taper still feels good, and checking the floor tiller. And you can see it's bending quite a bit more now than it was initially. The limbs still feel pretty equal. This one maybe feels just a hair stiffer, but we'll see. Excuse me. We'll see what it looks like when it's braced. So I feel like I'm pretty close, if not right there, to getting this thing strung for the first time. And so let me show you one way that I kind of use to measure that, to decide whether I'm ready or not. I mean, I can kind of feel based on the resistance on the floor tiller, but if you haven't had a lot of experience doing floor tiller, you might not know. So another way that I can check is to use a stringer. That was something that I didn't mention as one of the items to get in the beginning. I overlooked that. I really recommend getting a solid stringer when you're first getting into bow making. There's ways to do this without using a stringer, but it's a safe and easy way to work with your bow at this point while it's still pretty stiff. Let me adjust this just to make sure that you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this stringer on. It's one that just cups onto each end. I like this kind better than the ones that have the rubber pad that sit on the limb. Those put uneven stress on the limbs, and I don't like that, especially for this purpose. It wouldn't work at all. Because what we're going to do right now, I'm just going to lift this up like I would as if I was stringing it, and just get a sense for how difficult it is to lift. You know, right there is about as much as the bow is going to be bending at brace. And if I feel like I could lift this with one hand and slide that string on, then I think the bow's ready to brace. If I'm really struggling and it takes two hands to lift it, I'm going to take some more wood off and get it to a place where it's more comfortable. But if I feel like I can do it, then I think I'm in business. I don't want to wait a whole lot longer than that, because I'm eager to see what the bow's going to look like when it's strung and I can see the curve in the limbs. Let's see how things are looking. So that gets us when we're ready to string. In my opinion, that gets us through the floor tillering stage. So this is where we're going to end this video, and the next video will be on how to make the self nocks, so we have a place to put the string, and then we'll be ready to string the bow for the first time. So thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful so far. Let me know if you're following along with your own build. If you're having any trouble, don't hesitate to ask, and we'll get those string grooves on there and we'll get it strung. That's always an exciting part for me, to get the string on for the first time. Alright, take care.